What if you meditate for years and never see the light everyone else describes? If there is one question I got asked countless times over the last 25 years as a teacher, then it is the question, why don't I see light? The answer to this question has nothing to do with meditation itself. The real problem starts much earlier, not with the meditation and not with you, but with the assumption hidden inside the question itself. Because the question assumes that seeing is the goal. It assumes that if consciousness is developing, then sooner or later something extraordinary should appear before your eyes. A light, a color, a figure, an energy, something unmistakable that confirms you are finally progressing. It is such a common assumption that very few people ever stop to ask where it came from. Who decided that spiritual perception should be visual? Who decided that consciousness announces itself through light? And perhaps the more interesting question is, what if consciousness has been communicating with you all along, but not in the language you expected? I have watched the following many times over the years. Two people can leave exactly the same retreat, having sat through the same practices, listened to the same teachings, and shared the same space. And yet, when they describe what happened to them, it sounds as they attended two completely different events. One person speaks about colors and geometries and brilliant light they saw before their inner eye. The other simply says, well, I can't explain it, but for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. If we judge those two experiences by modern spiritual standards, we immediately assume that the first person had the deeper experience. But this is not true, and it roots in the modern ideas and concepts of spiritual growth that float around. The first perception is directed to the higher senses that are more close to our physical perception. It is the easier thing to see with them. And this is where people really get wrong. And I have seen this many times over the decades. Much of modern spirituality has become fascinated by the experiences that can be described. People compare visions, they compare sensations, they compare what they saw during meditation, what appeared in dreams, what colors surrounded another person, or whether they felt vibrations moving through their body. Very little attention is given to the fact that in the ancient traditions, there was no value given to the seeing of light. In the best case, it is a side effect, a nice add-on, but it is not what makes you a conscious person. The truth is a different one. The ancient traditions begin with the feeling of discernment of energy, of frequencies, and not by the seeing. The goal is to first learn to feel your energy and the state you are in, and then to learn to control your frequency, your system. Then to feel the energy and all its qualities around you, and then to become aware of the different states of energy that flow within you, and then you learn to control them. You enter the true qualities. And at the end of them, the seeing begins. The seeing and perception of light suddenly becomes very structured then, clear, and you learn also to bring yourself into that state, not randomly, just when you want to. What follows then is once you can see the light within you, the state of energy expressed as light, you see it also as a different energetic state that surrounds you. People forget that the seeing is not the momentum and that everyone renders what they see differently. Everyone has their unique quality once they see. And of course, the true question is, what is if the experience itself of seeing light changes you. Because it does not matter how extraordinary the light is you can see. If it does not change something deep within you, if the event disappears, it's not important. And perhaps the distinction deserves far more attention than it usually receives. But just think about it for a moment. Our change of how we perceive starts already in our childhood. When children begin describing unusual perceptions, adults often ask them, "So what did you see?" We rarely ask our children, "What did you feel in that moment?" Notice how naturally our culture places vision above every other sense, as though the eyes are somehow the final authority of reality. Why have we reduced spiritual development almost entirely to what we hope to see? Why is this a qualification? Because once we begin to ask this question, the entire conversation changes. It changes because the ancient traditions never made this mistake. The traditions I work with, the Kemetic, the Vedic, and the Kabbalistic traditions, each developed extraordinary, detailed maps of consciousness. And what surprises most people when they encounter these maps for the first time is how little emphasis any of them place on vision. The Kemetic tradition, for example, described perception through the concept of seer, a word that is often translated as perception or insight, but which in practice refers to something much closer to what we might call direct knowing. Seer was not about seeing a light or receiving an image. It was the capacity to perceive truth without needing it to arrive through the senses at all. These priests who developed these practices over thousands of years were remarkably precise in their language. And when they described the development of consciousness, they almost never spoke about what a person would see. They spoke about what a person would come to understand. The Vedic tradition approaches the same question from a different angle but arrived at a remarkably similar conclusion. The concept of prajna, deep wisdom, direct understanding, was considered one of the highest expressions of conscious development, and it had almost nothing to do with visual experience. The Upanishads described consciousness as something that illuminates from within, not something that produces images. When they spoke of light, they were almost speaking metaphorically about an understanding itself, not about something you would literally perceive with your eyes during meditation. And the Kabbalistic tradition, perhaps more explicitly than any other, distinguished between different faculties of perception and placed what we might call inner seeing relatively low on the scale of spiritual development. The higher levels of consciousness described in the Kabbalistic literature are consistently characterized not by what a person sees, but by the quality of understanding they are able to hold. Shokma, wisdom, is described as a flash of insight that arrives before the mind has time to process it, closer to a sudden knowing than to any visual experience. And what I find extraordinary about this is not that the traditions agree, they often do not agree on many things, but one point they all arrive at is the similar observation. The development of consciousness does not announce itself primarily through vision. It announces itself through the quality of your understanding, through the precision of your discernment, through the depth of your patience, through changes in how you actually live, which are often so gradual that you barely notice them, but others around you might do. I think of it this way. If you are standing in a dark room and someone switches on a powerful light, you will be temporarily overwhelmed. Your eyes will struggle, the experience will be dramatic and memorable, but once the light is switched off, you are standing in the same room as before, and nothing has changed. Now imagine a different scenario. Imagine that instead of a sudden light, your eyes very gradually adapt to the darkness until you begin to perceive the things that were always there, but you could not previously see. The shapes of the room emerge slowly, the outlines become clearer, the space becomes navigable. And this time the perception remains because it was never dependent on an external event. It was a change in you. That, I think, is closer to how consciousness actually develops in most people. This is how you adapt to see the light. Not as a sudden flash that confirms that you are special with things you see, but as a slow, quiet expansion of what you are able to perceive and understand, so gradual that you might not notice it is happening at all. But at some point, it will be there, and in your own terms, with discernment, steady, deeply rooted in your feeling and understanding. There is a free tool in the description in this video. It's called Begin. And it's a first evaluation of the state of consciousness. My name is Nicky Sabeti. If you like this content, please like and subscribe and help this channel grow. And I see you in the next episode. Thank you for watching.